let's take a look at some more challenging function rules. You can have function rules, well, they can be almost anything. You can even have exponents, but we're not doing those yet. You can have function rules that have multiplication and addition, subtraction attached to it. So there's put my function rule right in here in my process column. And so as we put these in, when I take out the x, I'm going to put some parentheses in to kind of try to preserve that idea that I'm supposed to be taking 2 and I'm supposed to multiply it by whatever number my x is. So we want to make sure we keep that multiplication there. And then subtract 3. So always remember to do your multiplication first. So 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So this is really negative 4 up there. So negative 4, take away 3 more, gives me negative 7. And when we record that, when my input is 2, I end up with an output of negative 7. By the way, guys, this is where we put into practice all of those evaluating expression skills that we learned in spring. This is where they come in useful. All right, for the next one, it's 2 times, and now my input, my x, is going to be 1 minus 3. Do the multiplication first. 2 times 1 is just 2, so it's really 2 minus 3, and that's negative 1. So when my input is positive 1, my output is negative 1. I have a tendency to almost always refer to my x's as inputs and my y's as outputs, simply because I do functions so much. For when my input is 3, so that's going to be replacing the x there. So instead of 2 times x, it's going to be 2 times 3 minus 3. So do the multiplication first. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 3 is 3. So when my input is 3, my output is 3. And then for the last one, I'm going to replace that x with 5. So instead of 2 times x, it's 2 times 5 minus 3. And 2 times 5 is really 10. So 10 minus 3 is 7. So when my input is 5, my output is 7. Taking a look at when we have some negative signs in there, it becomes very important to keep track of what's going on. And that's where that process column helps. So here's my rule, negative x plus 2. All right, so I'm going to take a lot of inputs. I'm going to put them into this rule. I'm going to get some outputs, and then I'm going to list them together as an ordered pair. So I have a negative in front of my x. It stays. It's part of the rule. I can't change that. So when I go and I take out the x and I replace it with this number, negative 4, I now have negative 4. Yikes. Okay, so remember, take care of that. This is really a positive 4. And in fact, it might help you to understand that whenever you see a negative in front of your x, it's really telling you to change whatever sign it is you have on your x. So if your x was negative 4, make it positive 4. You can think of it that way. 4 plus 2 is 6. So when I put in negative 4, I get out 6. Same thing here. So if you're thinking about a negative x as just meaning the opposite of x, you would see if you put in a negative 1, you'd get out a positive 1 there. But if you're going to do it the long way, you would make sure that you keep that negative in front of the x. You take out the x, right? Big gaping hole there where my x used to be. I put in the number I'm going to be using for my input, and I see that negative 1, or the opposite of negative 1, is positive 1. So do be very careful if you see a negative sign in front of your x. Makes things more challenging. Oh wait, positive 1 plus 2 is 3. So when I put in negative 1, I get out positive 3. If you're putting in a positive number, we still have to switch the sign if it's negative x. So negative, take out that x, leave the whole 2, positive 2. And that becomes negative 2. All right, and I'm supposed to add 2 to this. So negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So when I put in 2, I get out 0. And when I have negative x, my x is 5. and I have to add 2. All right, I change this into -5, right? You can think of it as multiplying by -1. -5 plus 2 is -3. So when I have an input of 5, my output is -3. So that's how you would deal with it when you have just a negative sign in front of your x. You can always think of it as a -1 times x if that helps you visualize what's going on a little better. When we have a something like this is a little unorthodox. Usually when we write our function rules, we do like to put the x term in the front of the rule. So some people would like to think of this as maybe you could, if you really don't like it, maybe write as, let me switch the terms places. I can do this as long as I don't leave any signs behind. So I still have to remember that I'm subtracting the 4x, okay, and then that 1 is a positive, so it's like adding 1. So you could switch them around if it helps you any. Otherwise, you just would take your rule and write it in there. And we put our inputs in where the x is. So 1 minus 4, and this is 4 times x, so 4 times -2. And always do the multiplication first using that sign out front. That will help you. So this is really now plus 8. -4 times -2 is +8. So I'm going to replace that whole thing with +8. So 1 plus 8 is 9. So when I put them together and I put an input of -2, I get an output of +9. If I place in a 0 in here for x, once again, you still have to do that multiplication first. So -4 times 0 is 0. So we always think of 0 as positive. So we add 0. So 1 plus 0 is 1. So when I have an input of 0, my output is 1. And if I take out the x and I replace it with a +1, still do your multiplication first. This will become -4 times 1 is just -4. So it's going to be 1 minus 4, and that will give you -3. So your ordered pair would be 1, oops, forgot my negative, 1, -3. And then finally 1 minus whatever 4 times 2 is. Okay, so using the sign out front to help you do this part first. Okay, -4 times 2 is -8, so this is really 1 minus 8, and that will be -7. So input of 2 gives me an output of -7.